Good morning and welcome to the December 17th, 2019 Operations Committee. And we'll get right into it and start with the Sustainability Report, school year 2018-2019. Hi, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Joanna P. Sounier. I am the Sustainability Analyst for City Schools. I'm based in Operations. And I'm going to be sharing a report of last year's sustainability activities. It worked. To recap, we do have a sustainability plan. It was passed by the full board in 2016, and we have 6 issue areas where all of our work falls under it. We have a number of detailed metrics and goals in each of those categories. And what I'm going to be sharing today is really just a couple of highlights from each of these. I do have a very detailed summary report, which I'm happy to share if you'd like to see that. I do have a variety of hyperlinks throughout the presentation, which will bring you to more detailed information. The sustainability plan is in sync with the blueprint and with our equity policy. And so really much of the work that we're doing supports that, all 3 of the categories of wholeness, literacy, and leadership. And throughout the presentation, we will see different opportunities for promoting that work. We use the term green schools often, and it can mean different things to different people. So I just want to take also a moment to pause and speak about that for a moment. There are really 2 broad categories. One is about the actual school buildings themselves and the operations, and making our operations beneficial both for the students and staff who occupy our buildings, as well as to reduce the impact on the environment. And the second piece is about the learning that takes place in our buildings and increasing the environmental literacy and stewardship of our students. And those 2 things combined help support the academic and the mental health and physical health of our students. And so we believe that all of those components are helpful, which is why this work is so interdisciplinary and crosses so many departments across the entire organization.
I mean, it's easy to discern the qualitative benefits of this, but how do you gauge the quantitative benefits?
The quantitative benefits are indeed much more difficult. If you look to the very end of the presentations, I do have some links to research that has been done, not in our schools, but across different disciplines, measuring things like academic achievement or memory or retention, or things when students have had opportunities to be outside rather than just inside, or when there is good air quality research. So we have a number of partners that are primarily focused, as you say, on the qualitative piece, and getting to that quantitative piece is more challenging. So like Hopkins, for example, they did do a longitudinal study with the Environmental Protection Agency, and we are beginning to get some research about air quality as one quantitative piece and trying to tie that to test scores. But that research is still early.
So in 5 years, you'd be able to give some...
We are hoping
metrics.
To have additional information about that.
But it'll take a while.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
So the first category we're speaking about is about develop environmentally literate students, that being the primary purpose of our organization. So one of the things we are trying to do is to train and assist our staff in this work. So we have a number of partners that are providing professional development to our teachers, and getting them both familiar with new curriculum that we are developing, as well as understanding the value of the work. And we also are training some of our custodial and maintenance staff through the occupational safety training on the benefits of changing some of the day-to-day practices. We have worked a lot primarily with our science office on developing more experiences that are out in the community that are tied to our curriculum. So many of these partners that you'll see listed already were serving our students or hosting our students, but they weren't necessarily aligned to the curriculum. So it required a teacher who believed in the benefit of that or found the time to squeeze it in. We are saying, look, now you can bring kids to the zoo in third grade and it fits into the science curriculum in a specific unit. And that is helping to increase the number of participants. And when coupled with free buses, which has been a chronic challenge for schools, that is really helping to get kids out and about and seeing different opportunities in different places that they may not have visited, whether that be career opportunities or science brought to life. The grades with an asterisk next to it are what are referred to as MeWEs. That is a meaningful watershed educational experience, and that is required by the state of Maryland that we have to provide. And it requires both indoor learning, an outdoor experience, and an action project. And so we have worked a lot with our partners to develop curriculum and programming and support for our teachers to do that work. A couple of the items I just wanted to highlight. At Great Kids Farm, we now have 4 farms to school educators, rather than having that be a place where any teacher can raise his or her hand and say, I want to bring my kids and I have found money. We have made that aligned to the second grade science program. So trying to have it be more equitable, because we had some kids who by the end of 8th grade may have been 3 times to Great Kids Farm, and then we had some kids who never went. We are saying this is embedded in second grade and trying to get more of our kids out there. So those numbers reflect the farms to school educators who started sort of midway through the fall last year and are hoping to have even more kids come this year. In 4th grade, this is a program with the social studies and is part of a federal program, and we're getting a grant to bring kids out to 3 locations in the region. And those kids also get passes for their families that can then bring them to local and state and federal parks at no cost for the remainder of the school year and summer. Another important part is connecting our schools to partners. We have lots of different partners out there, and so we really try and work hard to connect them in the right way, and that could be as short as a single visit. It could be a year-long project or a multi-year project. It really depends on the capacity and the interest of both the partner and the school. Moving to the healthy school environments category, I wanted to highlight the green cleaning program. We are under requirement to change all of our cleaning products to be less toxic. This is proving to be challenging because of our decentralized model. So we do have every school principal buys his or her own cleaning products. So we are working to educate custodial staff and school leadership on the requirements of that program. We also have many of our schools have contract cleaners, and so we have set in a process whereby those contractors have to attest that they are in compliance with the state, with our rules as well.
Can you talk a little bit more about why this has been a challenge? We are decentralized, but at the same time, we're hierarchical. We have 140 principals. It's only 140 people. It seems to me the message can be delivered in a way that they understand what they need to do. I'm not sure I understand why it's so difficult when it's something that the board or at least the administration adopted as a mandate.
I think people, first of all, love their bathrooms to smell like lemon. And so there's a strong feeling of clean. People are very attached to their own cleaning products and how things should smell and look. And so to have a bathroom just smell like nothing rather than, a specific scent is proving to actually be very challenging. And so trying to mandate that somebody buy a particular product when we still have many options for schools to buy products, the procurement process is quite open, I should say. So schools are still able to buy pieces, and we don't have a great system for rewards or tracking of all of that information right now.
But what is the expectation for each school in terms of the products that they buy, and how has it been communicated to them?
So the expectation is that if you have staff custodians, that they are expected to buy these products listed for the majority of their cleaning
Right.
needs. And if they have a contract custodian, that most of those contracts, they include the supplies. So the contractor can use their own supplies, but they have to meet the criteria for cleaning, for the green.
Where does that expectation come from, the board or the CEO? How was it actually codified?
It is part of the sustainability policy,
Mm-hmm.
and so we have communicated that as part of the back-to-school readiness piece through variety of communications, leadership action updates, and so on to school leaders.
Right. I can't really understand, because someone wants their bathroom to smell like lemon, that we as, the administration can't figure out a way to ensure 100% compliance with something that seems relatively easy to implement, just because a principal has a particular affinity for a certain product. I mean, we're not talking about educating our kids or climate or sort of justice. We're talking about a simple practice that I think could easily be put into place. But I don't quite get it, but I trust it's a challenge.
Yes, it is a ongoing, effort and trying to come at it from different directions. Moving to the natural resources category, we have been working to reduce our solid waste. Last year, for the first time, we actually had schools sign up for recycling, because we had situations where not all schools were recycling, but the city Department of Public Works, which picks up our recycling from schools at no cost to us, we're going to every single school once a week. So the sign-up system has worked well. We now have a point of contact. We are not getting data from the City Department of Public Works, so we do not have good metrics on the number of schools that are actually participating. We also don't have any volume data, so that is an ongoing challenge for us. We do have a lot of our student-led greening grants and efforts focused on recycling and reducing. So there are opportunities to get kids involved. It's often the kids who are doing the collection, working with their custodian at the school to implement the program. And our older students often are receiving service learning hours for participating in those programs. And I wanted to highlight that our information technology department does have an e-waste contract now in place. And so when electronics are no longer able to be updated or used, they are getting recycled correctly. And all of our new equipment coming in does meet an Energy Star certification for electricity use. Conserving energy is a big program of ours. We are using a software to track those. There are numerous errors and changes that get caught, so we have saved a number, a big chunk of funding there. We are doing a number of upgrade projects, so both trying to sort of hit the big ticket items of gymnasiums and auditoriums. So we were able to use BGE rebates, for 10 schools, and then did entire school lighting projects at 2 schools. I would also like to highlight that Graceland and Holabird are our 2 schools that will be net zero energy, and those are well under construction and scheduled to open next summer. So we are working with those schools also to work on the behavior modification and sort of getting prepared for when you're in the school, because we know that just because the school is built to be super energy efficient, won't necessarily operate that way unless everyone in the building is really working toward that goal. So trying to work with the educational staff and the teachers there on integrating that into the curriculum and programming and preparation. The next category is improving school green spaces. We are working with different schools at different stages on garden projects. As I mentioned earlier, we do have the Farms to School educators now in place, and we did work on a project with the City Department of Public Works where they pulled up asphalt at a number of our schools for stormwater management purposes, and are also doing some tree planting on our campuses.
Are they doing that to meet their mitigation or offsite
Correct.
mitigation? Is there a finite or almost infinite supply of those kinds of projects in terms of the obligations of DPW?
There are. We actually visited a number of schools with them. They wanted to do more, but there were some schools that were not suitable, either because while we want all of our schoolyards to be as green as possible, sometimes the one patch of concrete that they wanted to remove was the one place where 400 kids are playing foursquare, during recess, and it just didn't make sense. Like it wouldn't be able to tolerate grass. It would just be a mud pit. Or there may be other reasons why we couldn't do it. So there will be a second round of projects where they are actually putting in bioretention ponds. So those are mostly at the edges of parking lots rather than pulling up asphalt, which was in the round one. I wanted to highlight that we are in partnership with the City of Baltimore, is participating in a program called Cities Connecting Children to Nature, and Mayor Young did sign an outdoor Bill of Rights in the spring. And so we are in conversation with them about how we may work to green our schoolyards more and really pull in different partners to figure out what that looks like on both the implementation and then, of course, the maintenance of those spaces going forward. Engaging school communities is a multifaceted piece. I just wanted to highlight that in addition to the partners that I mentioned earlier, we are getting ongoing support for a number of our greening efforts from Constellation, BGE, Krieger, et cetera, really trying to direct those funds in the best places that we can. And some of that has been last year was for my staff position. It has also gone to fund some of our green grants, which I'll speak about in a moment. We have really worked in engaging school communities is trying to get our really support teachers and school leaders in schools for what does this work mean, what resources are out there. There's so much information coming at schools. There are a number of resources, but trying to figure out how to access them and what may be appropriate. We now do have school sustainability points of contact at most of our schools, and a number of schools have submitted a sustainability plan for their school where they have to identify how they plan to meet the basic criteria that we have set out for recycling and energy conservation and the green cleaning. I wanted to highlight the Green Leader Achievement Units, the AUs. This has been something that has been helpful for those teachers that are already doing this work. This can be a motivation for them, and they can document their work and receive achievement units for that. And that has also been a helpful way to identify teachers and really get them additional support because we can see what they're doing as versus feeling isolated in their own location where they may not know other things that are going on. We also are working to build student leadership. We have a number of schools that are continuing to get the green grants through the City Office of Sustainability. And some of those are focused on gardening, on recycling, on energy conservation. Parks and People has a number of internships. The City Office of Sustainability also does. We are working on trying to promote more youth works programs over the summer that have a green focus. And really figuring out shadow days and speakers and things to really promote students in seeing what the career and educational opportunities might be. Just also separate from directly to the plan, I wanted to highlight all of the 21st century schools that are meeting the LEED requirements. This is the green building standard. So we have a number of schools that have already reached their certification. The requirement by the state is silver, but you can see that a number of our schools have reached the gold standard. And then a number of the schools are still in the either construction or design phase and haven't yet reached the full certification. The challenges are similar to, as I have described in past years. There are a tremendous number of things, as you know, going on at schools and really figuring out how we can integrate this work into other work that's already going on. given the budget, the time constraints, the coordination needed. So we're continually trying to work with what programs already exist and how might this work help support and further those goals that are already in place. And we find that there are many overlaps and ways that we can really support work that is already ongoing. Going forward, a big change this year is that City Schools has adopted the Analyst Sustainability position as a full-time position in the Operations Department. We are really continuing to work on how this work supports the blueprint and looking at continual opportunities for equity. So whether it be something like the second grade field trip to Great Kids Farm or what different partnerships look like, really how can we really keep that front and center in our work. And continuing our work to provide resources and figure out what schools need and how we can really pull in the number of partners that we have. We do have, some of our partners have challenges of their own, so that can also be something that we need to really figure out if when we're referring to a resource, what is the depth of that resource. But trying to keep all of those in one place. So we have worked a lot on the communications and collection of resources and making those accessible with the redesign of the website and a drive where teachers can go and partners can go to find opportunities. That concludes my presentation. As I said earlier, we do have just a number of different pieces in the appendix about some of the supporting documentation. And I would also like to say that Raj Bachubai is here with me, our energy manager, so if you have questions regarding energy, they may be best directed to her. Thank you.
I guess it said that 17% of the schools submitted for the sustainability plans. Mm-hmm. Is that a function of the fact, I mean, it looks like it was 17%, 18 and 19, probably the same schools. But is that a function of partnerships, money, time, value, or some kind of...
I think it's an indication that there was someone at the building that feels strongly about this work. And that could be the principal.
I mean, I'm talking about the 83%.
The 83%.
That didn't.
That did not. I would say it's an indication that there is nobody at the building that feels strongly enough to elevate this over the other work that they are facing, and that they haven't quite figured out how to make it a priority in their school building.
So in terms of changing their dynamic, is it moral suasion or you just leave them alone?
I have tried to reach out to those schools to find that sustainability point of contact, because most schools have assigned somebody, and sometimes that person is, also has 9 other designations that they've been titled with, and so I don't hear from them, or they're like, I'm sorry, this can't be a priority for me right now. So trying to offer support for sort of entry-level, smaller type projects, and then if that does not succeed, I move on to the other locations.
And lastly, Baltimore Rec and Parks, what's your relationship there?
We work a lot with them through, I would say, a couple of programs. The first is the Every Kid in a Park. That is the 4th grade program, so a number of our students go to Gwynns Falls Leakin Park and Carrie Murray Nature Center and have a morning or a 3-hour experience wandering the trails and going down to the stream there. We also work a lot with the tree program, so Tree Baltimore, on tree planting efforts and coordination with many of our partners.
I was just going to say, I think the challenge that that Joanna's referencing with schools is that, and it relates to Andy's question, Commissioner Frank's question earlier about the custodial issue, is that we've got a lot of different schools trying to do a lot of things, and there's multiple requirements on them. So very few people are just the sustainability coordinator. That is one thing they're doing on top of being the test coordinator or whatever other designations they have. And so it is a challenge for something like this. Everything we're always trying to do, one of our most precious resources is time before principals, before teachers. The amount of time we have for professional learning opportunities and the amount of time we have for meetings is very, very limited. So there are so many things we're trying to get schools to do, and so we're very fortunate to have Joanna and Raj focused on this and providing supports to schools, and we've made a lot of progress on this. But, you know, if you're trying to reach a saturation point of all schools, that would be a really dedicated effort. That means you're not doing something else. So what is it that you're not doing?
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners and North Avenue staff. My name is Dorothy Hellman, the Executive Director of the 21st Century Program, and I will be providing the winter. Can you hear me now? Okay. And I will be providing the winter update. This is by no means the annual report. That robust report will be completed within the next 2 weeks, and that will be presented at the January Board of Commissioners meeting. The agenda is fairly straightforward and simple. I'm going to be talking about the progress of Year 1, Year 2 schools. I'll touch a little bit on the on MSA program highlights. Again, the details will follow in the annual report. I'll talk about local hiring, swing location, and transportation logistics, and talk a little bit about our future with our plan amendments, and then I'll close out with our save the dates. 10 of the Year 1 planned schools are complete. The last, which is Patterson Claremont High School, is actually under construction right now. That started back in June 2019, and that will be completed in September 2021. The caveat to that, it's a two-phase project. The first part, the building itself, will be open in 2021. However, the fields and the demo of the second building, that will not be completed until a year later. Where Year 2 schools are concerned, there are 17 schools in that program. The first, Fairmont Hartford, was completed back in September the 3rd. We had that open in over the summer. The next three, John Rura, Baybrook, and Calvin Rodwell, those will open in January 2020, followed by Mary E. Rodman in September of 2020 of next year. We will definitely have 8 deliveries in 2021. That will be our peak year for the program. And the program will be substantially complete in 2022, which is when Highlandtown will be completed. The last of the Year 2 programs, Commodore John Rogers, we're currently going through feasibility studies and soliciting AE services right now. That will be completed in 2024, and that will round out the Year 1 and the Year 2 projects. This is a snapshot of what MSA will be presenting in the annual report, the program spend, the MBE successes, and the project deliveries. Out of the $1.12 billion program, $839 million has been spent to date, of which $289 million went to MBE companies. We're currently tracking at 33.62% average where MBE is concerned, compared to the state requirement, which I think is at 29%. Where project delivery is concerned, 11 of the 28 schools under the program are complete, and our financials currently, primarily for year one schools, they're tracking 5% under budget for the completed schools.
Dorothy, can you remind me, for the MBE, is the denominator just construction cost, or is it total development cost? And do MBEs include professional services or just construction?
It's construction cost. Operational costs are not included.
Is there an effort also to work with or procure minority and women-owned professional services like architectural engineering, things like that? Is that part of a at least unwritten goal for the project?
It's an unwritten goal, but it's an unwritten goal.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing definitive that says it has to be male or female. It's simply minority businesses.
In construction?
In construction, yes. Where local hiring is concerned, the subcontractors working on the projects have consistently exceeded expectations. Year one, they have committed to 283 new hires, and when verified at the end of the program, our current count is 711. Year two, the current commitment is at 166. Normally, we do not have our final counts until 6 months after the project is complete because we have to check names and addresses and phone numbers. But we intend to exceed the 166 in city resident hires. We do continue to seek opportunities to increase local hire. One of the things we learned from MSA and from our partnership with MOED is that not all job postings are actually going to MOED from the subs. We are now requiring or mandating that the subcontractors submit all the job postings, including all the job projections, to MOED. One of the reasons they had not been doing this was because some of the positions are a lot highly skilled. Most of the positions that are currently being hired are for lower skilled wages. And so regardless of whether or not MOED is able to fill those positions, all positions will now go through MOED, regardless of their ability to fill it or not. MOED continues to also invest in education and training to grow a strong and talented workforce. And they're also working with our CET community as well to improve applicant skill sets. This chart pretty much covers our projects that are currently under construction. Year one, which actually shows 9, is specific to Patterson Claremont, which is the last of the year one projects under construction right now. Our unofficial local hire is at 9. The others, currently, the total commitments are at 166, but again, we intend for these to substantially grow once the project actually closes out. There is no correlation whatsoever between the cost of a project, whether it's RURA at $45 million, having 33 local hires, as compared to Baybrook, which is another project at $45 million that has unofficially 9 local hires. It's all based on the pool that is provided at the time and the commitment of the sub in increasing city resident hires. Background investigation is managed by city schools. To date, we have processed 6,209 applications, 281 were not cleared by the FBI or by Maryland. In November, city schools started an appeals process, which is pretty much kind of considered our second chance program in a sense. The employer, not city schools, actually takes the risk. Since we've initiated this program in November 2019, 6 persons have submitted an appeal, and of these, only one person has been cleared. The things that limit us with regards to being able to clear others, we have to ensure that if you have a homicide or murder, any crime or conviction, any crime that involves children or any felonies within the last 10 years, you will not be considered for an appeal. However, if there is a misdemeanor that's done within the last 5 years, that is what we look at to provide additional clearance.
I was momentarily distracted. So going back to background investigation,
Yes.
the 281 jobs, those were the local hires that were,
No, the 281 are applicants that were not
okay,
cleared
I'm
to
sorry.
work.
So that there were 6,200 applicants for how many jobs?
Up to this period, correct.
For how many jobs?
I don't have a number for the amount of jobs, but up to this point, for the entire program, since we started back in 2015, we have 6,209 applicants. This is a rolling number that increases every single month.
But these are applicants for which positions?
These are applicants for positions working with construction managers on site. So it can be electricians, can be journeymen, can be carpenters, can be general laborers. This is where our pool of applicants come from.
So this isn't the local resident hiring commitment. These are all jobs?
These are all jobs.
Okay, thanks.
The 21st Century Student Internship Program is another program. This is managed by city schools, and we've been doing this since 2016. We are working with MSA to increase participation. To date, we have hired 18 students. 2017, when we started, we hired 6. In 2018, we hired 4, and just this past summer, we hired 8. The difficulty in increasing these numbers, it's really with our AE firms. They're not under any mandate with regards to hiring. What we are doing is we're attending meetings with the subs. We're attending meetings with our architects and our engineers, and we're actually making a soft recommendation for them to actually increase the opportunities. Unless they provide opportunities, Urban Alliance, even though we could potentially have students that could fill these positions, Urban Alliance is not able to place students. But at this point, I do know that we have students. What we need is opportunity. So we will be working on that as we get into the new year.
Good morning. Is
Hello.
that something that could be included in the initial solicitation as a requirement to include student opportunities?
Actually, we just revised the letter MSA sends out to their subcontractors, and we have added that language to the solicitation. But again, it is a recommendation. It's not a mandate or a requirement.
The 18 jobs, were those in construction? Or
They included working in architects' offices. They included being a design assistant. They included being on the site as a laborer or as a apprentice supervisor on site.
And is Urban Alliance our partner in trying to achieve these hirings?
Yes, they are.
I'm not familiar. What is or who is Urban Alliance?
Urban Alliance is a local organization, actually a lot more local than just city. I think they're a state organization, and they actually work with organizations like the state and provide opportunities for students that are in high school to actually engage with companies. They teach them how to go in and to interview for positions. They train them with soft skills, and they actually complement the CTE program in a sense that they actually provide an introduction to the workforce.
So Urban Alliance, its scope with us doesn't include trying to identify potential companies that would actually do the hiring. They're preparing the students for the hiring.
Correct. They prepare the students. And so us as city schools or as MSA or architect engineer partners, we're the ones that need to provide the opportunities for these kids to actually participate.
I mean, on Allison's point earlier, there's so much to do with so many things and how do you value things. And I'm curious, I imagine this number could come up if other things didn't happen, like if you spent more time on this. So I'm curious how relatively important is this? Because it seems like the numbers are sort of remarkably low, and it may be a reflection of the fact if we were to put resources towards this, something else that's equally important or more important wouldn't happen. So can you just speak to the relative importance of this, whether substantively or optically, the fact that we're well into this and there's so few students have been placed in these opportunities?
As someone that came through the internship program when I was young, because I also I worked in a company before I became an architect, so I understand. One of the challenges, and again, we do have time, we do have resources, and we are beginning this process. I want you to know and to understand that. One of the challenges that we're finding is that in other organizations, whether it's retail, you go in and you're there for 8 weeks. And it's pretty much cut and dry. You're there to help, assist to serve, you're a cashier, you do something and then you're out. When you're working in an architectural company or in a construction company, it's sort of a specialty in a sense. Part of the feedback that we have been getting is that the curriculum currently at the CTE level, the programs that the kids actually use at school, whether that's an AutoCAD 14, 15, 18, or 20, the Illustrator program that they use, does not necessarily complement what most of these companies are using right now. And so when they also, with a very short or very small overhead, really wants to hire someone, you technically just end up having someone coming in and actually just working, maybe just doing office work in a sense, not necessarily for that core internship position that you're hoping that they would fill. And so there is an expectation that this is just an introduction to a company for someone that wants to do this, whether it's be an architect or an engineer or a contractor in the long term. It's not sustainable pretty much at this point. It's simply an introduction to the program.
The final point I would make, I think we should acknowledge and celebrate those companies that believe to do it. So maybe in these public presentations, we could actually call out those that agree to do this.
I think that's a great idea, and I would fully support that. Another snapshot again. This pretty much just shows all our schools that are in swing locations. This year, school year 1920, we actually have 12 schools in swing locations. Of these, 11 are actually on yellow bus transportation. That number will be reduced to 9 when John Rura, Baybrook, and Calvin Rodwell, when they officially open January 6th of next year. Looking forward, the current plan that we have now under the 21st Century Program does have $350,000 available to address future studies under the Year 3 plan. A few weeks ago, the Office of New Initiatives actually rolled out a new plan which recommends that we concentrate on renovating high schools instead. That revised Year 3 plan facilitated studies on 5 schools with the impact to 8 programs. These include Frederick Douglass, Joseph C. Briscoe, Baltimore City College, Western High, Poly, Francis M. Wood, Vivian T., BDJ, and Edmondson High School. The board will have the opportunity to vote on January the 14th for this new strategy, which will facilitate the start of the high school feasibility studies. So we're looking forward to that. Lastly, we have Save the Date. It's great when we can actually celebrate more school openings. It means that we have kids that are leaving schools that are in need of severe repair, and they're actually going into a 21st century environment. On January the 4th, which is a Saturday from 10 to 12, 3 schools will be celebrating in one location. Baybrook, Calvin Rodwell, and John Rura, all elementary middle schools, will have their grand opening at the Baybrook site. And after that, it will be followed by an open house and tour from 1 to 3 p.m. at all individual schools. These schools will also have soft celebratory openings on Monday, the 6th of January, And invitations will absolutely be sent to each of you to be in attendance. Any questions?
No, terrific. Thank you very much, Dorothy.
Thank you.
Have a great holiday.
You too.
Okay. And Courtney, fiscal year 21 budget development update.
Hello, good morning. Courtney Desabay, Special Assistant to the Chief Financial Officer, and with me today I have...
Kevin Cronin. I'm a budget analyst in the finance group.
So Kevin is one of our senior budget analysts. He's primarily responsible for the updating and development of the FSF Fair Student Funding Model, as well as managing 4 CLNs as their budget analyst. So today we have 3 main sections to the update. This month's update. So we're going to discuss a little bit about the enrollment projections process. We're going to talk about a couple things that we're considering as updates for the Fair Student Funding Model. And we're going to talk about the district priority engagement updates today. So firstly, we have the enrollment projection process. This is developing the projections for fiscal year 21. We received the final 930 enrollment November 18th. We have a contractor we work with who does the numerical projections. They generally use about a 5 years of data to project for the upcoming year. We do variances depending on the changes. For example, if a school recently changed grade configurations or merged with another school, we may use different variations. We may use 2 years instead. We may use a grade progression. If the most recent year, for example, they just moved out of swing space into a new building, instead of taking the last 5 years worth of data, the previous 4 years is fairly useless, we'll use the most recent year. So there are different variances in terms of how we do the numerical data. Then we meet internally with the work group over a period of 3 days. This consists of folks from planning, enrollment choice and transfer, new initiatives, finance. I think we had someone from 21st Century as well. And we all meet to kind of go through the initial numerical projections and provide feedback and input on those initial projections. So taking into account what we know is going to change in terms of portfolio, grade configurations, any other updates, cap increases for charters, any other updates that need to be considered for the numerical projections before they're sent out to schools. So we did those last week. Tomorrow, we're sending out to principals to give them until January 6th to review their projections. Principals have the opportunity to look at the numbers that they've been given and determine whether or not they want to provide a response. No response means you accept the update as is. The deadline is pretty set. We are giving, significantly more time than we have previously, and we're also doing it a little bit earlier in the year than we have previously as well. But even though it is more time, take into account the fact that it is the holiday, Christmas and New Year's, and knowing that folks may not necessarily get to it as much. But we're taking, generally speaking, the feedback that we receive from principals tends to be a little more optimistic. A lot of responses say, no, we're going to have more kids than what you're projecting. So we take all the feedback into account, but we don't necessarily incorporate all of the updates. We have to look to see what's really feasible within the scope of the district-wide projection. So that ends January 6th. And then we have an second internal review where we take all the information we receive from the principals and we go through a final sort of like yes or no, determine what we're accepting, what we're not accepting, how it affects the overall count, where the kids, in an instance where, a principal says, I anticipate that my count is going to be 20 students higher. We have to kind of look through the nearby schools and see, are there schools where we think these 20 kids are going to come from? It's kind of a zero-sum game. So we kind of put all these pieces together to end up with the final enrollment projections that we use for developing the fiscal year 21 budget. Any question on the enrollment projections? No? Okay. Next section is going to be some of the updates, or 2 specific updates that we're looking at for the Fair Student Funding Model. As you recall, in fiscal year 19, we did an update to the model. So this will be the 3rd year, fiscal year 21, the 3rd year of the new funding model that we updated, added in the new weights, taking out like the old MSA advanced and basic weights, putting in poverty, concentration of poverty, baseline services, et cetera. So Kevin's going to talk us through 2 of the changes that we're looking at.
Again, good morning. For the upcoming budget year for fiscal year '21 that we're currently starting to work on allocations, there are two things that we expect to change in the model. One is that for the last 2 years, since we implemented the new FSF methodology, we've provided certain schools with what we call hold harmless funding. And hold harmless essentially provided a soft landing for schools who were affected by the methodology itself rather than by enrollment count or by the demographics of their kids. And in fiscal 19, so last school year, the first year that we implemented the new methodology, there were 50-odd schools that received a little over $5 million in the aggregate of this kind of soft landing money, this hold harmless money. That amount stepped down to $3 million for the current school year, and we anticipate not funding any more of this hold harmless now that we're going into the third year of the new methodology. We would anticipate $0 allocated toward that hold harmless funding for fiscal 21, which means that that pot of money is now available to go back into the pot that's available for traditional school based per pupil funding. So that's the first item that we expect to change this year. The second is what we call the baseline funding supplement. Under the old methodology, we used to have a small school supplement. We called it foundation support. It was a little extra money that we provided to schools who didn't have large enough enrollment to achieve certain, let's call it a viability baseline. The school was limited in terms of the economies of scale that some of the larger schools are able to achieve. The smaller schools could not do that. That old small school support, that foundation support, was replaced under the new methodology with what we call the baseline funding supplement. And it's similar to that small school support, but it's a little more scientific, if you will. Rather than just counting kids, it looks at a number of factors. For example, it looks at what specific grade those kids are in. So under the old methodology, 2 schools with enrollment of 200 would have each gotten the same amount of funding. Under the new methodology, 2 schools with enrollment of 200, we look at the actual grades that those kids are in. And if the grade configuration is such that one of those schools needs an extra third grade and the other school doesn't, then that particular school's viability number, their baseline number, is higher, and they will get more money under this new funding support. So there's really essentially an individual baseline that's calculated for every single school based on the specific number of kids they have, the grades that those kids are in, the number of teachers they have, the number of planning periods that those teachers get per week, the size of their building and how much they need to contribute to custodial, et cetera, et cetera.
So under the current model, not the future model, baseline funding support, how many schools actually receive this supplement?
I can get the exact number for you. It was, I want to say it was 30-some. Let me get back to you with the exact number.
Mm-hmm. It actually went down slightly at enrollment adjustments from what it was in the spring last year, but we can provide the exact number and the dollar amounts.
In any event, the reason that we're mentioning this today is that we're now, when we were developing budgets for this current year, this time last year, we were still in the first year of the new methodology. Now we're a year and a half into the new methodology, and we're starting to get a feel for how the baseline funding is impacting schools and impacting other things that we didn't necessarily think about when we first created the new methodology in conjunction with ERS, the consulting group that we were working with. And we've considered tweaking the funding methodology a little bit for the baseline. We're still working on exactly how we might do that, whether we might cap the amount or, on a per pupil basis or something like that. But we're currently analyzing the alternatives that we might consider for how to tweak this particular support for fiscal 21.
Yeah, part of the baseline funding, or what makes it particularly interesting, is that it's not allocating funds on a per pupil basis like the rest of the funding model. So a school, because of their configuration could receive funding disproportional to the amount of kids that they have, mainly based on size, but sometimes just based on configurations or the fact that they're limited to specific grades, or they may be a middle high that requires different elements in an elementary school and so forth. So what happens is when we deal with things like Title I comparability, which look at school allocations on a per pupil basis, it tends to skew those numbers. So specific schools tend to be outliers and then require additional funding that's not necessarily, like I said, falling in line with their per pupil amounts. So what we're looking at is ways in which we can sort of modify that baseline funding supplement to make sure the schools still have what's necessary for them to be sustainable, but that they're not as far of an outlier in creating issues in other areas. So it's something that we have a couple different ideas that we're kind of working towards, one of which might be just, like Kevin mentioned, capping the limit to which they may receive support or changing some of the parameters that we would evaluate for the baseline funding support. All right, any questions on this? All right. The third and final item, the district-wide priority engagements. So we've completed the 4 priority engagements we had discussed before. We had the youth engagement. I think we had approximately 20 to 30 students there, and we'll provide a report, I think, next month, which has the attendance from the different events. The community partners we had at Reach Partnership School on the 18th of November. We had about 20 to 30 community partners attend and participate. The format's been a little different this year, as opposed to us just kind of presenting the list of priorities and then telling them go to the website and take the survey. It was a lot more interactive. We had a lot of feedback from the folks who were present. They worked through different groups, presented out. We did a lot of note taking and discussion. So it was really very interesting. The third engagement, the general engagement, was at Emerson Westside. And then we had the last engagement last week, the multilingual engagement at Moravia Park, which is extremely well attended. We had probably 70 to 80 people there. This is the second year that we're doing a multilingual engagement pertaining to the budget. And we have seen some consistency between the groups when we've had these engagements last year and this year. A lot of things that they're coming to provide feedback on tend to boil down to 3 major categories. One being transportation, another one being support, like just more multilingual support, translation services, and the third being issues with like bullying. They did see a number of items in the priority discussions, the priority items that were listed by Cabinet that they felt impacted their community specifically, and they were pleased to give feedback and input on. There was also a great sense of pleasure at the inclusion. I think this is a group that is not always necessarily targeted for their feedback and input, and to a certain extent, not that I think it's been intentional, but I don't know if we've always made it a point to seek their feedback and input with regards to items like this. So it was very much appreciated. They had the opportunity to give feedback, where they had a forum with which to have the discussion. I would like to give a lot of credit to the FC and communications team under Chief Hike Hubbard, who provided tremendous amount of support in the planning and the translation. And we had a lot of our multilingual paras present to provide support as well. So it was really very well attended, very well supported, and very engaging. And we used the same format where it's sort of like a round robin. Everyone went to some of the different work groups, discussed priorities in small groups, and then reported back out to the larger group on the things that kind of resonated with them, or what they wanted to see or how they wanted to see it implemented, or even things that were not necessarily listed on the priorities that they wanted to give for consideration, that we took a lot of feedback on as well. The rest of the PowerPoint presentation is a listing of the priorities selected by Cabinet, similar in number to those from last year. Last year we had 28, there are about 31 in there. We made the commitment up front, we made the statement up front that we were going to try to incorporate as much of this as we can, but we know what the situation is in terms of limited resources. So there was not a guarantee given that every single thing that is selected will end up. We asked everyone to select the top 5 priorities, and just like last year, what we're going to do is, when we present the final presentation to the board on the budget, we're trying to show how those top 5 priorities that were selected by the committee were incorporated into the budget development process. So that is the goal for this budget as well, like last year. Last year we were able to show the top 5 things that were built in and how the funding was allocated to sort of meet the needs and feedback from the community. So we're hoping to be able to do that again this year. Any questions?
These district-wide priorities, those have been developed by the staff, or?
Yes. So the mandate given to Cabinet was to, first of all, not put anything in front of the community that we did not feel we could reasonably or realistically take on. So Cabinet went through the process, the discussion of looking at things that they felt could be implemented in fiscal year 21. Not all of them have the same financial implications. There's some things which, might be a replacement, where instead of doing A, we do B. Some things might require additional funding, and there are other things that it might not actually require funding. This is going to be the next phase of Cabinet's work through, is looking at the things that have received the most feedback and input. How do we go about the implementation process? Is it something where two things can kind of be, integrated into one sort of item, or is there an umbrella type project that would cover more than one thing? Like, for example, there are community members who pointed out they didn't vote for an item like heating and cooling because, if we're focusing on the 21st century project, we're going to have new buildings. We won't need as much heating and cooling in the old buildings. So some of these things may have different integration factors or levels of interaction between them. So that'll be the next phase for Cabinet, is identifying the cost, the funding sources, and also how these priorities sort of play off against each other.
I have to confess, I don't remember these from last year. So there was a similar list of priorities that were generated by the Cabinet that were
Yes.
shared publicly?
Yes, there was a similar list last year, generated by Cabinet. We had a number of board members attend. We had, I think, one at Mervo, one at, I can't remember all the sites, but we did 4 meetings. Cherry Hill, yeah,
Right.
we did Dorothy I. Height. So we had 4 of them last year as well. The attendance this year has been better, and so far the number of responses. Last year we had about 220, 230 responses to the survey. So far this year we're looking at about 300 or so responses. The communications team has done, social media blasts, which have generated a few more responses. We've also been a little more proactive at the engagement sites, using like QR codes that people scan from their phones so they can go there right away and fill in their responses. Not that folks aren't committed to providing responses, but it tends to be a lot more productive when you engage them right there on site, as opposed to they go home and think about it, or maybe forget about it, or other things come up. Mm-hmm. So I think that has helped as well, and we're going to leave it open at least till Friday, till the holidays, before we close it up, to see if we can get a few more responses during the course of this week as well. And we've discussed with the communication team doing another social media blast, and it is up on our website.
I mean, these are, I think, helpful, and it's great that they're being shared publicly. I'm not sure the connection between these and the work. Allison will appreciate my confusion about the work of the Strategic Planning Committee and the extent to which these are actually goals that will be incorporated into a larger strategic planning framework, or things that will become measured. But these are very direct, very clear, they're very understandable, and I think I'm sorry I didn't see it last time. It's very helpful to see what are the priorities being expressed publicly in terms of how we're going to allocate our resources. I find this very helpful.
Yeah, this stemmed from, and we'd had a couple discussions here in Ops and the public meeting on this last year. This stemmed from the initial discussion that, from I think like 2 years ago, when the community felt that we had given them an opportunity for feedback on the budget, but by that point the budget was already determined or decided, that there was very little opportunity for them to give feedback, impactful feedback that would actually affect how the budget was being designed. Because usually we had these engagements going into like January, February, March, and at that point we're kind of set in stone. We know what the allocations are. Cabinet's gone through the process of allocating funding internally. And if someone says, I would have preferred A instead of B, there's very little opportunity between that point and when we present the final budget for any adjustments to be made. So our response to that was to sort of move it back in the timeline, take it a little bit earlier. And we're doing this on the school side as well, where you're engaging the community members to just discuss priorities. Outside of dollars, outside of resources, you're discussing what's important to you as a community, what's important to you as a parent, what's important to you as a teacher, et cetera, and look at ways in which we can incorporate that into the budget development process where it has an opportunity for actual implementation and impact. So that being the case, and we saw it work pretty well last year, we also did it on the school side. Schools generally have the 2 levels of engagement. They have their SFC meetings and their follow-up meetings after their initial budget development. We also added an earlier priority discussion, which is taking place simultaneously with the central office one, where it's the same thing. The principals are going to their community members and saying, here are some of the things that we're thinking of as a school. What do you think about these priorities? Tell us what's important to you. And we have a format that the FCE office has worked on for them, templates that they've worked on in terms of how they're going to gather the responses, how they're going to present the information. I think we shared those with you in the September Ops Committee meeting, or one of those. I think we might have sent those materials along. But that provides like just some of the format that we've given and context that we've given to sort of standardize that experience between schools as well. So they've added on that priority discussion as part of their engagement process for the budget.
And I would just say that then following all the work that, the really great work that the Finance Department and Community Engagement did on these forums, then on Monday, the Cabinet, at our regular Cabinet meeting, we went through all the feedback that they've culled together from all these sources, the community meetings, the student focus groups, the principal focus groups, and kind of, rated, like, had a matrix that indicated which of these were rated as the highest priorities by which of those groups. So taking the summary of the survey data, and then as a cabinet kind of went through, and then we're trying to cull down the list. We do want it to be a kind of discrete, smaller list of things that we can really communicate out to the community that these are our main priorities this year, so that it's not a laundry list of 30 things, but it's a much shorter list. So we kind of went through the first stage of trying to cut that down a little bit, and then now we're going to go through another stage of trying to cut it down further to be that's reflective of what we heard from the communities, various communities and stakeholders, and then really reflective of what we think we can take on and put in the and focus on both in terms of resources, of staff resources and budget this year.
Yeah. I just wanted to add one more thing. The multilingual engagement this year was truly multilingual. Last year, the multilingual engagement was really more or less Spanish. This year, we had, Farsi, Arabic, French. I personally was working with a group of French individuals, had to dust off my rusty French from about 10 years ago. We had, a Spanish group as well, but it was really multilingual. We had a lot of different families represented, a lot of different cultures represented, so it was really very good to see that. And a lot of the information or feedback that we received from those groups was, everyone has their sort of area that, they kind of focus on, but a lot of it was very similar. Like I said, it kind of boiled down to those same three main areas that we kind of heard repeated throughout too. But it was good to see that level of interaction. It was a lot of work for the team, but I think it was worth it to not just have our multilingual engagement be a Spanish engagement. There are a lot more cultures that make up city schools, so it's really very good to see that interaction. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Joe Vogel. I'm the Interim Director of Procurement. There are 5 items on the agenda today. The first one is a contract with Marco Technologies. It's to provide Konica digital copiers to city schools. The estimated annual amount is $1,200,000. Includes all the copier maintenance and supplies, except paper. The contract period is May 1 of 2020 through April 30th of 2023. Next item is a competitively solicited contract with Garrett Metal Detectors to provide multi-zone walk-through metal detectors, handheld security wands, installation, calibration, and training. The estimated annual contract amount is $200,000, and the term is January 14th of 2020 through January 13th of 2023, with 1 2-year renewal option. Next item is a competitively solicited contract with Towson Mechanical in the amount of $1,457,500. Contract provides HVAC installation and replacement construction services at Belmont Elementary School. The next item is a competitively solicited contract, again with Towson Mechanical, in a total amount of $1,703,900. The contract provides HVAC installation, replacement construction services at Edgecombe Circle Elementary School. And the last item is, again, a competitively solicited contract with Building Concepts and Bronner Builders to provide structural building renovation and repair services at city schools. The estimated annual amount of the contract is $1 million. The contract term is January 15th of 2020 through January 14th of 2023, with 1 2-year renewal option.
You want to yield back the balance of your time?
Pardon me?
Yield back the balance of your time. Any questions?
Okay.
Any questions? You still looking? Okay.
Yes. Bronner, is that just broad-based contract, or is it specific schools? How does that work? The Bronner one.
Building Concepts and Bronner Builders will be a district-wide use in the event of any structural deficiencies found, such as a car going through a brick wall, separation of bricks, mortar on the exterior of the building. We would use it throughout the district. It's not site-specific unless it's identified as being a problem.
nothing happens, you get your money back?
Well, there's no money expended until there's,
Till
till
they
the
run
need.
into the building?
Correct, until the
Okay.
need is identified.
Thanks, guys. Okay, this concludes the Operations Committee meeting. The next meeting will be held on January 21st, 2020, and everybody have a wonderful holiday and Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa. And we'll see you next year.